Good morning, everybody. We are here for a very special Tableau Conference edition of Workout Wednesday. This is week 43, and if you're watching this, I'm hoping you just got out of our session on Wednesday and are hoping to find those little clues that can help you push through the exercise. And with that being said, let's just dive right in this week. So we're looking at what looks to be mostly a logic puzzle in my mind. We've got different levels of coloring, different sorts of labels, different sorts of marks. We have a filled map. We also have a dot map layered on top of each other. I'm assuming at the beginning, without even starting, that this is a dual axis map. So we'll have to work on that and see if we can figure it out. We're coloring things at different levels of detail, so you can see that the states are filled in, and we're highlighting different cities. California in particular stands out, where I actually have a star here down in what looks to be Los Angeles or somewhere. And the state itself, it's filled, so we're working at different levels of detail, so that's going to be potentially tricky to deal with. And the tooltips have different numbers in them. We don't know what they are, so hopefully the information, the instructions tell us what to do there. So let's get going. So first of all, we're looking at step 1, color states 3 ways. Top overall state by sales, top 5 state by sales, and bottom state by sales. Bottom 5 state by sales, and all others. So I'm probably going to do some kind of ranking calculation to figure this out. And what I think you might have ran into an issue with is trying to work with this with a map. We don't need to build the map initially. We can build just a simple crosstab to get our answers right and then translate it over to the map, which I think will actually help a lot if you're stuck at this point. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So like I said, instead of a map, I'm just going to go ahead and drag state out onto rows. And this way, I can just validate that things are pulling in correctly. I can check against the example here and check my workbook and see if I'm right. We also have a filter here on segment. So let's go ahead and add that. Okay, so the examples on consumer and corporate, I'm going to do so. I'm going to assume that I need this filter in context because I'm working with all these different levels of detail. So to start out with, I'm just going to put this in context already and hope that I'm right. Okay, so we're doing by sales. So I can drag this out, sort the data, and just see if we can balance out. So we have California, New York, Texas, Washington, and Pennsylvania. So top overall state was California. We can see that that is a bright blue. And the rest, Washington, Texas, Pennsylvania, and New York. Perfect. And if we sort it the other way, we can see West Virginia is our lowest state, which is this darker orange. And we have Maine, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Montana. Okay, so I think we're good. So we're at least balancing on the data side. Let's just build out the calculation to show our colors how Luke wants us to. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do, you could do this probably a number of different ways, but I'm just going to use a rank function just for simplicity's sake. And we're just going to pick out those different ranks of each state. So I'm going to start by saying rank sum of sales in descending order, which is the view you're looking at behind the calculation. And I'm going to specifically say if it's 1, then we're going to say top state. So this will fulfill the top requirement, top overall state by sales. Then we can say top 5 after that because we've already hit that number 1. It's always going to be locked into this first line of the calculation. Say the same thing one more time. And this row, I'm going to say less than or equal to 5. And like I said before, yes, California does qualify for this, or the top ranked state does qualify for the second line. But since it works in an order of operations mode, California will always evaluate to 1 first and not get colored in the second line here. Just going to take this calculation and move it down a row. Trade the ordering to ascending, and we can just repeat our steps here. So we could say equals 1. So see, all we're doing is changing the order of the view. If I were to interact with my view behind me, this is what we're looking at now. Rank sum of sales ascending equals to 1. Then bottom state. Do the same thing again. Less than or equal to 5. Then bottom 5 states. And at this point, we could just say else all others. Okay, so there's our calculation to get our coloring right. And now we just need to add it to the view and see if we can set the table calculation properly. So in the crosstab, it defaults to table down, which is correct in this setting. But on the map, we're going to have to order it. We're going to have to set the table calculation to work in the way it's supposed to work. So what we're going to say, instead of table down, is use specific dimension and state, which is the same thing in this context, but this is what we want to use on the map. So we have top state, top 5 states, all others in blue, and the bottom ones are working out properly. So we've tracked off step 1 and step 2, and we can just go ahead and start building the map. So I'll open up a new sheet, say map, double click state, which will provide us our initial map. We want this to be a map mark, and we can throw our color on here. Like I said, this is going to be incorrect on the map, so we just need to go in and change our compute using to state. I'm going to go back to sheet 1 and make my segment filter apply across all worksheets, which will just make things easier as we validate, and see how we're working out. Cool, it looks good outside of the coloring. So let's just go ahead and change that really quickly and see if we can't get a similar color palette. I'm not too worried about getting the exact one, but let's give it a shot. So we can say all others is a gray. It's a little darker than that. The bottom state is a dark orange. The rest are a lighter orange. The top state is a darker blue, and the rest are a lighter blue. Okay, and that looks generally right. I'm not going to be worrying about the colors too much here. The instructions don't require us to match any certain colors, so this is generally the same thing that we're looking at in the example. And from here, I think it'll get a little trickier. So we're asking to label the top and bottom 5 states and add an X and a star before and after each of the state names. And this should be pretty easy enough. And I think the rest, the city stuff, is going to be the harder part. So let's go ahead and build this, and we'll come back to the city in a minute. So label the top and bottom 5 states and add an X and a star before and after each of the state names. I'm going to have to find this star mark somewhere. It would have been easier using a Mac, but now that I'm back on Windows, it's going to be a little bit of a hunt to find that. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate my color state, and I'm going to change the name to label state. And we don't need the top 1 scenario anymore. So I'm just going to take this out, change this to if, take this one out, and take my else out, because I just want the top 5 and the bottom 5 states. Everything else can be null. So instead of a string, we're just going to say adder a state on both of these levels. So if you're in the top 5 or the bottom 5, you're going to get the state attribute. Throw that on our labels. Change the compute using, again, this looks wrong, as you can very well see, but when I change the state, only those states that are colored orange or blue will be labeled. Okay, great, so this is looking good. I think we're about ready to move on to the city detail, which I think is going to be the more difficult part of this challenge. So let's take a look at that and see where we get. Okay, so let's take just a second and finish up the labeling on the states. I need to go look up the star code to get that right. So let's go to our Chrome and just look that up. So let's open a new tab here and look for this Windows code. So we have this black star, which is what we want in the example. It's white here, but we can change that once we finish the formatting. And it's character 9733. So let's go finish this label. So we have our label state field, and in the top 5 states we wanted a star. So right here before add or state, let's just add that character. So I can just simply type in char 9733 plus adder of state, and then plus char of 9733, and we should get our stars. What happened down here? Okay, we're not getting that. See if this will yell at me. I believe it's already a string, so that didn't work. I know that char 9733 will display that star in Tableau on different visualizations. Maybe it's just that we're using a map or on the label shelf. I know if I put that on the row shelf, it would show me a star. But we're not working on that right now. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it right in because that is the easy method. Just wanted to see if I could show something a little bit different. Let's do that on both sides here. On the lower states, we'll just throw that X. And all we're doing here is just concatenating strings together. So now we have our stars and our X's where they were appropriate. Close this, and great. So we're good on steps 1, 2, 3, and we want to show only the top city by sales for a state. For the top cities on the map, show a star state shape if the city is in the top 5, and an X if the city is in the bottom 5. Show circles for the rest. So I think this is a really similar problem to the state problem, and it'd be easier to solve if only the top and bottom city, or only the top cities for each state were in display. And we can do that since we're working with a context filter. We can filter out every other city because the segment filter happens first, and we can filter out every other city that doesn't match the top city in each state by using a level of detail calculation. I could try to work this out with table calcs. So if I duplicated latitude over to my rows and added city onto my level of detail, I'll get a dot map. And like I said, we have the issue that there's a dot for every city in each state, which is going to make this a little harder to work with. So if we could narrow this down to just that top city in each state, we should be able to have a little bit easier time. So what I'm going to do is build a level of detail calculation that will act as a filter, and hopefully that will get us there to the finish line in a much simpler fashion. So let's go ahead and start building that. So what I want to do is get the sales by city. So we can start to write that out. So if I say fixed by state and by city, sum of sales. That will get us the statewide, citywide, or the citywide sales in each state after the segment filter has been applied. And that's kind of the key, right? The gray segment filter is context filter, which happens first. It's in the top of the food chain, and this will happen next. And everything else happens after that. So we have city and state sales. And what we want to do now is take the max of that, so that will find the top one. So if we were thinking about Utah, and if Salt Lake City happened to be the highest sales in that state, this would find Salt Lake City's value. So we have that. That's one piece to the puzzle. Now let's see what we get here. So if we say, here's the max value by city and state. And then if we equal it out, let's take a new line here. I forgot. This was coming together in my head a little bit better, and now it's kind of waffling a little bit. So let's see what we can get to. Didn't want it to be aggregate, so let's go ahead and nest another fixed level of detail calculation here. Didn't want that to go to way. Okay, so I think this is what I wanted. Let's see if this works. So this says, by city and state, find sum of sales, and that will give me every city and state sales, and then equals the top value in that state. So this should, I think, filter out everything. This will give us a Boolean calculation. We should get it in our dimensions pane. And let's just drag this up. We get true or false like we expect, and we can hit OK. And this gives us a very limited number of cities. We have 48 cities for 48 states, which is what we were looking for. So I think I got this right here. I'm going to take this color state off and see where we get. I know in advance that this is going to be a shape mark, not a map mark. And we'll have to build a calculation to get us there. So we have show only the top city by sales for a state. That's done. We can check that. So in Utah, for example, we do have this dot here that's up near the center. Looks like the tooltips aren't all that great. So I'm not really sure what this might be yet. But it looks about in the right position. If I look at all these dots, I can see that they follow the same pattern that we have on our example. So I think we're good. So for the top cities on the map, show a star and an X if it's in the bottom 5, and show circles for the rest. And I think this is very, very similar to our color state field. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. Actually, no, I'm going to do label because we don't have the concept of top 1, bottom 1. It's just 3 categories. So let's go ahead and say city shape. If rank, sum of sales is less than 5, and then we just want a star. Excuse my alarm. Then if it's in the bottom 5, we want an X. And we could probably just leave this as null and see how this goes. So if we say OK, and this is our city shape, I can drag this here and see if we can set it appropriately and get our nice little shapes that we want for our labels. So let's go into the edit table calculation box, and I'm pretty sure I'm just going to check every box here, which is similar to your table down, table across. It's just across everything, right? So we have a star, we have an X, and we have a null. Not very creative, but it's going to get the job done. So let's go into our shapes, edit this. We'll give a star for a star, an X for an X, and a circle for the nulls, which is everybody else. So we have a star down here in LA, we have an X here in Wichita, star up there in what looks to be, I don't know, I have no idea. I'm going to guess Seattle. And we're looking okay. We have an X over here, somewhere in West Virginia, and a star over here in New York and Pennsylvania. So I think we got that right as well. Cool, so this is working out a lot easier than I thought it would, just by the simple fact that we narrowed down our data set to the top cities. I think this would be a lot more difficult without that in place. So let's see if we can just hurry and wrap this up. So size the star to be the largest, then the X, then the circles, and color white. So I can just color all of these white right now. It's no big deal. I can add my city shape field right to size, which is also no big deal. Let me just make a copy. And if you don't know what I did there, I simply held my control key, if you're on Windows, or command key on a Mac, and moved that field to a different mark, which just makes a copy of that. So it's an easier way to, stay in the flow of your build. Let's play with these manually. So the X is here, it's the biggest one. I want that to be in the middle. And just hit OK, and we should be on our way. So we have big stars, we have little dots, and we have medium-sized X's. And all we need to do at this point is right-click on our second latitude and say dual axis, and bam, there you have your map. And let's see if we can figure out the tooltips. I'm not sure what they actually are, but we're going to try to figure out anyway. So in Utah, where I live, that's where I like to focus. It just makes more sense to me to look at the state that's more relevant to me, and I don't know what it is about that, but it helps me see the bigger picture. So we have 9109 and 10. You have no clue what that means. If I hover over the city, I get an entirely different number, which I don't know what that means. The last tip is directed right at me. It says eventually format the tooltips, Curtis, which it looks like we never did. We didn't give instruction on what those are, so I don't really feel like I need to do them to finish the challenge. I think we're generally there. Without the instruction, I can't finish properly, so I'm going to go ahead and try to come up with something, but I don't know what it is. So 10 is a small number. We see 2861 here. I'm going to think that 10 in Utah specifically might be number of cities altogether after the filters are applied. So let's see if that might be it. So if we just even wrote a inline calculation and said by state count the distinct cities. So we have by state count distinct cities, and there's a 10. That's good. So that might be in Utah there are 10 cities. Nevada there are 5. In California there are 75, so I think that is correct. If we turn off this filter, I wonder if it's just total sales by state for the other one. So in California, with no filters applied, we can see over here that we have 81 and 457,688. I have no clue what that is, so there's sales of 175,000 here. The 81 matches. I'm not entirely sure. So let's just finish it up. Since the instructions don't give us any more detail, I'm just going to assume that maybe something's going wrong here. I know that my work is doing what I need it to do in places, and everything is matching appropriately, except for the tooltips. But without that context, we can't finish it up. So let's go ahead and format our tooltips, because we always want to format our tooltips, and just call it a day. So my inline calc was number of cities with sales. I don't need country. We're looking at the United States. It should be pretty obvious, I would hope. Okay, so let's see how this turns out. I'm going to turn off these buttons. And so now we have state, Utah, number of cities with sales, 10, and sales of 2944. If I hover over this dot here, I should get Orem in my tooltip, because it's null everywhere else. I'm not hovering over a city mark. It will only display when I hover over that city mark. If we want to get extra fancy, we could create city sales and display that in our tooltip when we hover over those individual tooltips. So if we said fixed at the city and state level, that will get us there. So we have city sales. And if I hover over, actually I have to add it back into my tooltip because I did edit that tooltip. We should get that on our view. So if I just put city down here on its own line, because these ones are only going to appear when you hover over that mark, this will put them at the bottom, and that will make a little bit more sense. Okay, so now when I hover over Orem, I should get that extra value. And it looks like I did the wrong one, but I did get the Orem in my tooltip, and I have city sales. Let's just do that. Now they're on the same line. 2944, 2944. So now I see what's going on. My state hover is showing the top city sales because I filtered out everything else. So let's go ahead and create a state sales field, and then we're going to be done. Oh, what happened? That was weird. Didn't take my changes. Maybe I clicked cancel on accident. Sorry, that was confusing. So state sales at state, and city sales down at city. And we have two different numbers. Oh, this is great. Utah, we have 11,220 and a 10, which is what we show here. When we hover over Orem, Utah, we get that. We get Orem, if I can get there. Circle's really tiny. Let's take LA for example. So we have California, total sales of 457,688. We have Los Angeles as the top city in California with sales of 175,851, and we have 81 cities with sales. Let's go ahead and format these so they look a little bit better. We're going to just call them currency with no decimals. And there we go. So that's it. This is done. I think everything is exactly how it should be. It was a pretty fun challenge. I do think that a lot of people are going to get tripped up on the city filtering. It's not a required step, but I do think it makes it easier. And if you don't do that, you're probably going to be in for a lot harder time than I was. I also think, as I said earlier, if you start out with the map and you work from the map and try to build everything just using the map, you're going to have a much worse time than those who started with a crosstab or a bar chart and just got the ordering right, which was really the basis for most of this challenge. Regardless, I hope you had a good time. I hope you were able to join us at TC, and if you weren't, I hope you were able to join us remotely and got something valuable out of this. Until next week, we'll see you later. Thanks.